We are live. Hello, hello, and welcome to the Literary Roadhouse Book Club. Today we're discussing The Heirs by Susan Rieger. I'm Anais, joined by Book Club regular Gerald Hornsby. Hey, Gerald.
Hey, hello.
And today we're also excited to have a guest on our show, Susan Pogorzelski, the author of Gold in the Days of Summer novella series. She's a YA author who founded Brown Bugle Books to help emerging writers share their literary vision and develop their writing talents. Her latest novel, The Last Letter, reaches its one-year anniversary in September. A percentage of proceeds from that book will go to her new foundation to combat Lyme disease. She's from Pennsylvania, studied English in college, and is the proud mama of adorable beagles. Welcome to the show, Susan.
Hello.
Very good.
I'm glad we're finally doing this because we had been talking about bringing you on since last year.
Yeah, I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah. And the reason we didn't earlier last year was because you were in the process of launching The Last Letter. So
that's right. I was in pre-pub chaos.
Okay. Well, if you want to learn more about Susan, stay with us. Or no, let me do that from the top. Can I cut this out? See, editing, it's magical.
Yeah.
That's why we edit the different tracks. Okay.
Yeah.
If you want to learn more about Susan, she will be staying with us after this episode to record a quick video interview. That video will be uploaded to our Patreon as special bonus content for our patrons. If you want to learn more about Susan, subscribe at patreon.com/literary roadhouse. You can decide how much to contribute, and every bit helps. Okay, let's get into this book. Oh,
yeah.
I'm like tapping my veins, like, I need another hit of this. Okay. Yeah. Let's go with our overall impressions. Let's start with Susan. Just what did you think of the book?
I didn't know what to expect, honestly. It's been quite a while since I dove into literary fiction, even though I love literary fiction. So I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was immediately captivated by the voice. Her writing, it just drew me in immediately. And I was happy to go along on the ride. I mean, do you want more? I can go as much into depth as you want me to.
No, it just cut out a little bit. Sometimes my Wi-Fi isn't great. And this one will cut out, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Gerald?
Yeah, after that, our last book club book, this was like lying in a hot bath. It was just very, very pleasant to read. Very pleasant.
Why do you always have to do Saunders like that? Okay, but I agree. It was a completely different experience reading this book than Lincoln and the Bardo, which we discussed last month. I love this. I mean, I'd say, there's a few things that I can like nitpick at later, but overall, I was just drawn in. There were sections where like the Susanna chapter had a plot per page. I mean, a plot twist per page. I was like, what? Yeah. What? I kept saying in Slack to Gerald that it's just like a really good soap opera. Like it just.
Yeah. And it's funny. Every time I thought there was something that I didn't like, I reconsidered it, and I'm like, wow, that's genius. Like every time I thought it was moving too slowly, I'm like, well, that's the purpose, because that she's telling her backstory, and she's, this is what legacy is. It's building up a legacy and building up a life. So every time there was something that I thought, oh, this, it's, I'm getting drawn out of it, or I realized that was the genius of her writing, is that it's on purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of funny, because I was writing. Because I know you had put some sort of questions or guidelines to the discussion today, and I was writing my responses to that, and another sort of point of view I sort of think, yeah, it's not so. And then when I thought about it again, I thought, no, actually, it's very clever. It's very clever. So yeah, when you think about it, which is what is literary fiction is all about. When you think about it, you think, oh, I understand.
I had so many moments. She would leave little clues that you didn't realize were little clues. Like, okay, real quick, we're going to get into characters in a second, but at Rupert's funeral, when Dominic Byrne says, that with a cricket ball, he could just smash a cricket ball, and watch out if, you get a body part in the way. I forget the exact line, but he'll like break a body part too. Kidding. Kind of. Ha ha ha. You think it's just a eulogy. No, he really did in his youth smash and splinter someone's shin. in retaliation for assault, and the only person who knows is Dominic, and you're just like, oh.
You don't realize it all comes full circle.
Very good. Yeah.
So let's talk about the characters, because that's the strength of this book, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Let's just talk about, okay, I already know Gerald's favorite character is also my favorite character. Susan, who's your favorite character?
My favorite character was Sam.
Sam, okay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed him. I think all of the characters were very, very developed and well-rounded, but there's just something about him. Even the way he treated Andrew, his flaws and everything there, it just made him more human, I thought. And I loved his relationship to Eleanor. I loved that he was the middle child, and there was that push and pull with his brothers that way. And I loved his relationship to Susanna as well.
Yeah,
she's a very close second, I think.
Yeah. Gerald, do you want to talk about your favorite?
My favorite's it's Eleanor by a mile. I just loved how sassy she was, how cynical she was, how unmoved by almost anything she was, and her one-line replies to her kids, to everyone, were just clever. It's just so on the button. I just loved her, and I love her a lot.
Yeah, I also am very partial to Eleanor. Eleanor's just like, she's kind of, savage, just like, man, her she's like mysterious, and she knows exactly what she's doing at all times. She's self-possessed. That's the word for her. She's so self-possessed. And she just like, she doesn't feel she owes anyone more than like duty. You know what I mean? Like, she's like, there was many themes. One of the themes that kept repeating was, when do children grow up and realize that their parents' lives don't revolve around them? And she, like, even though she was a very good mother and she was very, supportive and nurturing, she understood that very early on. Like, I thought, I just loved Eleanor. She's a queen.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could be Eleanor. It's a bit much.
And she was so unflappable, wasn't she? She was just cool and really honest and genuine and just very good.
I agree. I mean, she's definitely the pinnacle of the book. I imagined her as a little bit more calculated and stoic. But then in, I guess, the last third of the book, that my opinion of her just completely unraveled when you learn more about her relationship, especially her sexual relationship with Rupert. It added just another layer to her that I just really appreciated.
Yeah. Also, when Jim, after Rupert dies, pours out his heart to her at the Starbucks. I literally dropped the book and I was like, this is too much. I can't right now.
This is so, and I love her response to the appearance of the new heirs, and she's just so unmoved, so cool about it, and how she talks to her kids is totally different to how she thinks, but she's just so in control of everything. Just
yeah,
love fest.
Yeah. But there isn't a single character that I didn't like except maybe Jim. Jim was the one I liked the least. So let's do the least favorite characters. We can start with Susan again.
Oh, Andrew, hands down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think because I was viewing it through the eyes of Sam with his chapter, he just seemed very cold to me. And that was just his character. I mean, I understand that he and Sam wanted different things, but I didn't like how unforgiving he was, especially with regards to their wealth, I guess. There just seemed no compassion there from him.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. I see Andrew. I agree with you. Like, the way he was always criticizing the wealth was tacky and he was rude. But for some reason, he didn't seem as morally corrupt as like Jim to me. Like Jim was just like, his flaws seemed unforgivable. Where Andrew, it was like, I get your hangups, you know, rejected by family, growing up working class, feeling insecure. So it's like, you're not great, but go do your thing, you know, like go be wild somewhere else. Whereas Jim, I was just like, you're the worst.
Yeah.
See, I think that's where it's interesting, because I think when I was viewing Andrew, I was definitely viewing it from this family's point of view. And I think that's where the genius lies, because you get so drawn into this family that anybody who's kind of perceived as an outsider is automatically on the other side. Yeah. So I think that's what strikes me as the genius of the book and the genius of her writing, is that, you know, normally I would probably sympathize with Andrew and be on his side. But it was the fact that we were a part of this family for so long, that, and so in depth too, that lines were drawn.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't Team Fox.
No.
Yeah. No, for me, Jim, the reason Jim bothered me so much is he's at Rupert's funeral and he's thinking like, I'm going to run away with Eleanor. And I'm like, wow, her husband's body isn't even cold yet. Rupert isn't even dead. He's in his hospital room dying. And Jim is prowling on the outside. He never appreciates Anne until Eleanor rejects him. Really? And it's like giving you a great life. And Jim's the worst. Gerald, who's the worst for you?
I think yes, Jim. I don't like Jim, and to a certain extent, I don't like Sam sometimes. Sam is one of those characters that one part I love him. I love his you know, how deep he is, and how you know, how confused he is about many things, and then he does things, and I thought, I don't like him, and I think Rupert as well. Rupert is you know, you sort of think, oh, poor guy, you know, he was adopted and had this hard life, and did all this sort of stuff, but actually he was not a very nice person. And so I think she does this great thing that shows the depth of character, because sometimes you think they're nice, and sometimes you think actually, and Eleanor too, to a certain extent, Eleanor can be quite hard and quite cold and unforgiving. But you know, how she talks just blows me away. So yeah, I don't think I have a particular non-favorite. I'm not that keen on.
Yeah, I feel like I'm down the middle with Sam. I like how clever he is, but I find him so selfish. Like, he was another one who was like, Susanna, just he could have done better by Susanna. In the end, he did. He redeemed himself by the end. But like, poor Susanna for a lot of it. I was Team Susanna, yelling at Sam at some point, you know, just before like the middle, just before the miscarriage. But I mean, yeah. I like Sam because he's smart, and he really, well, they all sort of understand people really well. That's like one of my only criticisms is all these characters started to sound a little bit the same, because they all were the people who would just like come up to someone they hardly know and be like, oh, let me tell you everything about yourself in a piercing way right now, in a breath-piercing way, every single one of them. And like, okay, whatever. That's like the shtick of this book, and it's also thrilling. It's shtick, like, and whatever. And Anne's and the wife says to Jim something about how Eleanor is so amazing, and it's lucky for them that Jim didn't end up marrying Eleanor and married Anne, whatever. Like, just like this, like, nobody says that. Like, you just met Eleanor 20 minutes ago, and you're doing this whole thing about how she's so amazing, more amazing than the bride, and you're sitting bride side at a wedding. Like, there's a certain degree of like, no one would do that. Like, that is insane. Like, who does that? But whatever. Like, it was also fun. And Eleanor was a little bit of like this type heroine where everyone falls in love with her immediately, but whatever. Like, that's her role. That's her shtick.
Yeah, I think I made a note earlier about about the five sons, and something you said just now that sometimes the characters a little bit sort of overlapping, and I think so. I thought sometimes that the five sons are Harry, yes, Sam, yes, and the others, they're all a bit sort of grey and a bit sort of not there.
Yeah, well, I just want to make a point. One of the things that I like about the characters is that I am so torn about who I like and who I don't like, because they are so kind of flawed in that way. Sam, I can definitely see his selfishness. Actually, I think all of them had a type of selfishness about them. I think that was especially portrayed with this scene with Jack, when he had a daughter and he went to play his, was it the saxophone or the trombone? I forget which instrument he played. And basically left his daughter on his own. So I think they all had selfish tendencies that makes them especially flawed. But at the same time, they had a kind of charm that you want to just keep going with them and see how they turn out and hope that they redeem themselves.
Yeah. Has Annie's frozen? She's frozen. Yeah. I thought she was a bit quiet. This happens sometimes.
Where are you, Gerald?
I'm in the UK. I'm in on the east coast, about halfway up on the right hand side. So
okay.
I don't know. She's logged in again.
Yeah, I cut out when
Yeah.
Joe was saying what he was saying.
Okay.
I have it on your track, but can you just repeat it real quick just so I can catch up, and I'll keep the original for the track, for the edited version.
Oh yeah, I was saying
about, I think I heard gray flaws.
Yeah. About the sons and all that Sam and Harry, I think, and the others are a little bit sort of grey, a little bit sort of overlapping. They sometimes it was difficult to sort of get to understand what the purpose of the other sons were.
Yeah, especially Jack and Tom felt a little bit redundant. And then Susan, what were you saying?
I was just saying that I thought that was, what did I say? Oh, that's why I was so torn between who I like and who I dislike, because I liked everybody and I disliked everybody. And I thought that that was a really good indication of writing well drawn out characters. Especially, they all had kind of a similar flaw with regards to selfishness and egotism. Jack is an indication of that, where the scene where he basically left his newborn daughter to go do a gig. And you want to keep going on the ride. You want to like them. You want to hope that they redeem themselves. And eventually, I think most of them do, if not all of them, in some, at least small way. But yeah, I do agree that some of them seemed a little bit redundant. I was hoping that we would at least get chapters with everybody's heading so that we could kind of get more into their viewpoints. I don't think we heard much from Will or
or Tom.
Even Tom, yeah.
Though it's funny, even the different chapters, so the chapters were named after different characters, but it's not really like you were only from their point of view for that chapter.
Right.
Yeah. She's still stuck to the headlining characters, I guess you could say, which it makes sense. It's the ones that are in New York, because Will lives in LA, Jack lives in Austin, and Tom lives in Chicago. Yeah. They're not there all the time. It's Harry and Sam who live in New York with Eleanor.
I didn't put that piece together, that it was all New York bound. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And there's also a way in which there's like a fable-like quality. Not fable's not the right word, but like it's like a kind of like storybook kind of thing, where it's like, oh, first, this generation is all boys, the next generation is all girls, and this generation that's all boys, it's all dark hair, the next one is all blondes. Like, you know, there's a very interesting kind of, which is the kind of stuff you see in a fable, even though this isn't fable like at all in the plot structure, which I thought was interesting. It just like added this kind of like old literary sense to it. I feel like that's the kind of stuff you would get in like the 1800s, late 1800s type books with large families, and there was always like a symmetry, and like here's a group of children and they're like fabled to be this way, like, oh, all these marriageable daughters, oh, here's all the athletic boys, right? Like there's that sense of it, which I thought was good because she kept referring to those kinds of books. Like there was a aspirational quality to this book to be somehow like a modern version of that, which I thought was satisfying.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think also it sort of lent itself to being able to explore the different characters. So yes, they were all boys, and you know, they were all sort of very similar, but she did try to sort of split them off and make them individual characters and have individual character traits. Which is quite a difficult thing to do. I think it's quite hard when the people are sort of physically very similar, to then make their characters very different and interesting to a reader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also to juggle that many characters. I didn't get lost with all the characters until Hugh. I was like, who's Hugh at the end? I was like, it had been so long.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit more about the plot. I kept saying it's soap opera-esque. It's got some plot twists. Would you guys agree with me saying it's soap opera-esque, or am I not giving it its due, Susan?
No, I think you're absolutely right. As somebody who used to love soap operas when she was a kid, it's got that generational feel, and it's definitely got those plot twists that you look for. It's not. I don't think it's a quiet kind of dramatic. I think it's still dramatic in its own right, but the way that she wrote it, it's very subdued, which I really appreciated, because she could have gone the other way. It could have been very, commercial, very, I don't know, exaggerated.
Melodramatic.
But yes, that's the word. Perfect. Yep. But the way she did it, I mean, it made it realistic in that way, that this is very possible what could happen among generations.
Yeah.
Gerald?
Yeah, I think referring to it as a soap opera, I thought it was a little bit harsh, because it's a story. It is, and again, I sort of wrote this. It's a complete story, but it could have a sequel, or it could have extra bits to it. So it is. I think it sums up a lot of this book for me. Is that you think one thing, and then when you think deeply about it, it isn't. So yes, soap opera, it's a family, and it's what goes on within that family, and various people associated with the family. But it does have a start, a middle, and an end, and I think it ends at a good place and a good point. But which I liked, because I don't watch soap operas anymore. I used to, but I don't anymore. So, and I just think they're a big waste of time, really, because nothing ever happens in reality. Whereas with this, you've got the whole story in one book.
But Susan was saying it's very subdued, but I feel like the only reason it's subdued is because the characters are so mature, because you have people like Eleanor, because there's nothing subdued conceptually about a plot twist like there was a mistress all along with 2 children. Dun, dun, dun. The reason it feels subdued is because of the way that the characters respond to it. So that's what was really interesting. The way that, it could have had huge peaks and valleys. Like, oh, the new immigrant comes to New York and he has big aspirations and he wants to go to Yale. Oh my God, his lucky break. And now this Polish girl got pregnant. That's something that could also be extremely dramatic. Yeah. But again, it was just sort of the way that everyone reacted to things kind of made those sharp angles not as sharp. And I think it made it more mature.
Yes. And that is what I... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think because because she drew the characters so well. So you're going along with the characters, even though they're not first person, but you're still with the characters and understanding them and understanding how people can get into this situation with these other characters. So it's not just bang, this happens. You just sort of, oh, da, and then she sort of gets a bit close to him, and yeah, but he fends her off, and then all this sort of stuff. It's yeah, I think it's the way she wrote it makes that just a smooth entry into these plot points.
And you know, when I first read the book jacket, I had this preconceived notion about this book. I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be like a kind of who's the daddy plot. Like, is Rupert really the father? You know, is this woman Vera just out for the money? And even when we got to that part in the book, in the first third of the book, when we were introduced to Vera and her sons, I thought, okay, well, now the plot's kind of picking up a little bit. What's going to happen? But then she kind of backed off of them. And at first I was a little bit disappointed, and I thought, well, here again is the genius of this book, because it's not really about Vera. It's about the family, and it's about the reactions, and it's about the relationships to each other and Rupert's relationship to this woman. So even though it's almost like the plot is the background here, and these characters are at the forefront, and that the book was amazing in that way. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And one of the things that the book was exploring with regards to the boys that I liked a lot, I guess, for my age group, is the sense in how when you grow up, you're very much a tribe, you're a unit, the siblings, because I had that growing up where like the three of us were inseparable. But then as you become older and you get different jobs and you date and marry other people, all these little fractures come in and it doesn't seem as tightly knit. And I think it's Tom in this book who comments on that, who says, like, how did this happen? Like, how did we all kind of like come apart a little bit? And it reminds me, I remember when I was a teenager, my dad was feuding with his brothers, as adult siblings do. And I remember being like, that's so, you know, and I know that my dad was close to his brothers when he was a child. I'm like, how does that happen? Like, how, you know, can it be that you guys used to like be best friends and now there's all these dumb feuds happening? And my dad said to me, it'll happen to you guys too. Like, that's adult. That's what he said. He said, it'll happen to you. You'll get married. You'll get different opinions. You'll change. And I was just like, oh, the prophecy. And like, you know, and it's true. Like, I am still close to my brothers, but yeah, now there are more fracturalized than there were when we were kids. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it because it resonated for me personally.
Yeah. And as you become adults, I mean, all babies are born the same, and as you grow up through childhood, you especially if you're a close family, you have very similar attitudes about life, and as far as you have attitudes about life. But as you become an adult and as you grow, and I found as I've got older, is that my views with my two brothers, with whom I'm really close, have gone way different in different directions, and it's just how it happens.
Well, there's that whole question of nature versus nurture. Then you're in the same family, so that's nature, or nurtured. You're nurtured the same way, but then you kind of go off and do your thing. And they even in the book, most of them went to the same school.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's just individuals forming their own personalities.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a lot of themes. So we just touched on one, which is sort of the way the families fracture as they get older. There was also a lot of commentary on marriage. Gerald, as the married person here.
Yes.
How did you feel about the way the marriages played out, the secrets?
Yes. What
do you want
to
to ban Anne from listening to this episode?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Can we exclude her? Yeah, it's a piece of fiction, but from what I've read, I think it happens, especially in a sort of very middle class family like this, in that, which I think also describes her her attitude to the revelations about the two extra sons from this affair, and you know, her own sons are horrified, and she's sort of taking it in a stride. And I think at this level in society, I think it's almost a given. I get that impression, and we have it with our royal family over here, in that the male members of the royal family have affairs. They always do, always have done. So it's not a sort of idea that I'm, I've experienced of at my level, certainly. But it is how I understand middle class families behave.
Yeah, well, these are much more than middle class. This is like, woo,
Yeah.
upper middle. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the sense that I get as well about that class, especially in New York. And there's this sense of like, if you can afford to completely support a second family, then it's like, as long as you don't like abandon your duty to your first. I'm not okay with that, but I'm also not from that class. So
yeah.
That's an interesting point, because by the, I don't know, like the third or fourth bout of infidelity in the book, I started to get that impression that this was the norm. And that everybody understood that this was the norm, and that you just either, deal with it by taking care of the child, quietly or otherwise, or, especially when we got to the part with, was it Harry and Leah? And Sam was basically telling him just to just deal with it, suck it up, just, don't tell her. There was no surprise there from him, really. So it was almost like this was expected.
Yeah, and the problem there was that it was a student of his, which he explained away. No, it's fine, it's perfectly fine. But it's normal. It just seems normal.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't a student, it was a colleague. That's how he justified it to himself. Remember, Sam assumed it was a student. He was like, oh, please give me more credit than that. Says the guy who potentially got his mistress pregnant. Wants more credit than at least it was a colleague. Okay. Oh. Okay.
Didn't he say it wasn't as cliched as that? Did he actually say that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And because Sam was like, didn't you watch like the harassment videos? Like, she can basically get you in trouble with your job. You can be fired. He's like, no, give me more credit to that. It's not that cliched. Oh, I'm sorry, Harry. Oh, I'm sorry. Totally.
It's okay. It's totally fine.
Yeah. And there was also a lot of questioning of like, who's the father? Who's Nathan's father? Right? Hugh and Ian by the end, that's Rupert, but no one proved it, right? And throughout the book, they were even casting doubt as to who the five foxes' father was. Yes. Was it Rupert or was it Jim? By the end, I'm pretty convinced it's Rupert, but you know, and every single person.
Yeah, and we have here we have the two princes, the two sons of Prince Charles, who look very different, and one looks very much like a person that his mother had an affair with. And you think, red hair, the same features. No, not true.
That's such an interesting perspective, though. I mean, when the physical, can the physical be denied?
I don't know. Everybody does deny it. It's with this particular example, he is so different to his brother, and he's so much like this other person that his mother had an affair with and admitted having an affair with, and you just think, it's everybody knows, but no one will admit it. No, definitely not. Crazy.
Like, I'm pretty sure Jim's not Nathan's father. Like,
but the question is still there. That doubt is still there.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where like the doubt is still there because you want to believe it, but like, okay, Anne was having affairs for very understandable reasons because Jim was like the worst husband ever. But it lived separate lives. He had a whole separate apartment.
Yeah.
And then had a
wait a minute. Yeah. That separate apartment, that it was my understanding that it wasn't. Was he having affairs there?
I think he was having affairs, but not with Eleanor.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, because
I thought it was more of a symbolism thing for him.
No, because in the Jim chapter, it talks about how even after Anne, he kept seeing certain women, but that he was more careful. And when he, and going back to Nathan's parentage, it's not only that Anne was sleeping around and she and Jim weren't connected, and Jim was having affairs, just not with Eleanor, but also Jim had a vasectomy. Again, how is this not a soap opera? Jim, fatherless, childless man, had a vasectomy because if you can't have babies with Eleanor, okay, this is some days of our lives. Crazy. But and then Anne's like, oh, he's yours, woman who's been sleeping with other dudes. And Jim's like, it's true, vasectomies could 1 in every 1,000 fail. I'm like, okay.
Oh, denial is a very strong force.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a big part of why a lot of people would just, Eleanor didn't want to know whether or not Lisa's her half sister, and she didn't want to confirm whether or not Hugh and Ian were Rupert's kids. That was another strong part of the book, that denial theme.
Yeah.
Best of soap opera ever. I was telling a friend of mine to read it, like nagging her. Every single time I'd read a big plot twist, I would just send her a message like, you need to read this book right now. But it's funny because she likes to read a lot of literary stuff. So I would say, I wouldn't say this is the kind of book where you read it and then you like savor some like really rich, deep truth about humanity that will forever change you. Not necessarily. There was a lot of very good one-liners, very clever, insightful aphorisms about marriage and family and parenting. But it wasn't like you're sitting there like, yes, this is the deepest thing I've ever read. But it was just such a page turner.
Yeah. Well, I'm amazed that when I started reading it and I thought, yeah, okay, this is going to be, one of those books I'm going to struggle with. And I just read it and read it and read it. It's just so beautifully written, so clever, and the plot, in as much as there is a plot, just keeps rolling along, and then bang, a little twist there. So, oh, okay, so that happened, did it? All right.
Mm-hmm. And it's memorable. I feel like these characters are like a part of me now.
Yeah.
Like, as much as I don't want them to be, they are.
Yeah. It's a good time. Okay. So let's talk about the language. When we said overall impressions, the first thing Susan talked about was the prose. So can you get a little bit more into why you like the prose?
It was really just the voice. The voice was just, how do you explain voice? It was just very easy to read and understand and get sucked into the writing. It was just fluid. Mm-hmm. And then with regards to specific writing, it just, the way it developed with how she wove the backstory in, just throughout the entire book, she did this. It was just, I don't know, I don't have an adjective for it. It's just really well done.
Yeah, I was just looking now while we were talking, and what makes a book easy to read, and there's, you can read all sorts of rules about it, but changing sentence lengths and things like that, and she does that, and she does that so well, and she uses plain words. There's no complicated words, so nothing to stop you when you're reading and think, what's that mean, or no foreign language words. It's just she just tells the story, and she does it extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny you say the thing about that she uses plain language. Actually, I thought she used a lot of SAT words in a good way. Like, I was like, oh, I haven't seen that word in a while. Oh, that word does exist. I had that a lot.
I had to look stuff up.
Yeah.
Really?
I don't know what that says about me. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I did.
Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, not words that are like so esoteric you don't know what they mean or no one uses them, but just like, oh, I haven't seen that word in a while. Like, oh, yeah. I've encountered this before, but like not, like, yeah. I thought it was good. It was, especially because the characters were so well educated. They were just, it was like at their level. Like the way that they speak was the way that the prose was written. Like,
that's a good point. Yeah, that is a good point. Yes, That's interesting. I like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What I also liked was all of the allusions to other like to other mythology. I think they mentioned Oedipus and Clytemnestra a couple times, and different, books. I actually took the time to really kind of figure out the connection she was making whenever she mentioned one of these, either like one of these references.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Pride and Prejudice. I remember she was mentioned Hawthorne. So I remember kind of savoring that, especially as somebody who loves literature and loves history and mythology. Sorry if you hear my dogs, that's me. But as somebody who loves that stuff, I really tried to take the time and figure out the connections that she was making, and I think that added a level to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry, I know. God.
Well, I think also part of why the prose worked is the prose also was like a modern version of like the old kind of great Western novels, like the classics. Like again, the 1800s, the Dickens, and those kind. It had that sort of rhythm to it, like that kind of cadence a little bit, but modern, right? Because she would get into things that those authors wouldn't have gotten into, like some of the sex scenes. Bert and Vera, like what? But again, they didn't make me uncomfortable. It didn't feel exploitative or like they were written in a way to shock me. I don't know if you guys agree.
No, I think they did seem completely natural, and it did. Yeah, and you really got into the character of Rupert, because a lot of stuff revolved around him. But with Rupert, you understood his character, where he'd come from, and his upbringing, and why he thought the things he thought, and why he did the sort of things he did, and it didn't seem out of place for him at all. It just seemed the sort of thing that a guy like that would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's something else she did very well that is very difficult, is jumping between different people's perspectives in the same paragraph. Like she would jump from head to head to head. And I don't know if I've read a published novel that did that really poorly, but like I've read like a lot of like authors who are like trying to do that, emerging authors, and I'm just like, oh, it doesn't work. And I don't know what the secret sauce is to make it work. What makes it go from this just feels disjointed and like you don't have a point of view to this actually works really well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have any insights into why that worked.
Well, she used the third person omniscient, which allows you to easily do that. And I think a lot of novels nowadays, that used to be really common in, I would say, the early 19th and 20th centuries. But nowadays, it's mostly first person, which makes that switching point of view is completely disjointed. Mm-hmm. So the fact that she used that third person omniscient really allowed her to move between characters. Carson McCullers in The Heart is the Lonely Hunter did that really well as well. Mm-hmm. And when I was reading it, that's what struck me. It reminded me of that large cast of characters moving seamlessly between them. Sorry.
It's okay.
I don't know what they hear.
It's I think you also find, even when people do use third person, they use close third person, so it's just one little step removed from first person, and it's almost too close to do the head hopping thing. And when you mentioned it in your notes earlier, Anais, I thought, head hopping? Does she? I didn't notice. And normally that sort of thing goes bing with me, and think, oh no, this is. So she did it so well. I just went smooth on through it.
Oh, yeah, because you have a chapter called Susanna. You think it's all from Susanna's point of view, but I'm over here in Eleanor world for like 3 pages. Like it was the way she jumped around in a conversation. Yeah. Sometimes it was really effective. So we're 45 minutes in. I was going to talk about like motifs, symbols, Easter eggs, but I don't know that I have anything, so I'm just going to throw the question out there. If there was any sort of like, other than the allusions to other works of art, movies, was there any sort of symbols or motifs that you guys saw reappearing?
Not any recurring that I can think of. Kind of in line with the theme. I really, from the beginning, I got this whole patriarchy versus matriarchy theme, especially with the descriptions of the boys versus when they have girls. That you called it symmetry before. So it's not really a motif, but more aligned with the themes. But I got that whole feeling there.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I couldn't really pick anything up. It's interesting, just Susan, when you talked about matriarchy, patriarchy, is all the majority of the male characters and the family male characters are all so strong, so in charge, so in control of what happens, except for Eleanor. She's
And Eleanor's mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing. Eleanor was very critical of her mother, but I'm like, you're not that different in some way. In some way. And also there was this thing about how Eleanor, you know, she was sexually adventurous with Rupert, they had a good sex life, but she never submitted to him. And all their kids came out like her. And Vera, who did submit to him, the kids came out like him. Like there was a lot of that kind of stuff, like that, like perfect.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I even noticed that the granddaughters, 5 are biological, the 6th is adopted, and it's making me think, is there going to be another adopted one to make a 7?
Yeah.
Like there's just all of this sort of yeah.
But isn't that even interesting with the idea of legacy? Like how much do generations change? Really, you're almost always going to be similar to your parents in some way. There's not that much change between those generations. Behavior, between looks, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Do you guys have anything else to add before?
I liked it. I really enjoyed this book. I'm glad I read it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Okay, so we wrap up by doing like one sentence where we just like say, if you're going to recommend it to who, why it's great. Gerald can do the first one as an example.
Okay.
The one sentence review. 1 or 2.
I've written, it's a fascinating rolling commentary on middle class New York life.
Okay. Susan? Yeah.
I was just gonna say that's good. Can I copy that?
Yeah.
No, go ahead. I don't know what to say yet.
Yeah. I'd say, you know, it's a really mature adult soap opera, which isn't to say that it's explicit, just it's you need to have a very mature outlook on family, some of these characters, why they move, and it just page turner. Quick for me. Yeah. Susan?
I would just say that it's a brilliant take on legacy and the lives that we weave with each other, our families, and the people that surround us.
Good. Okay. Well, next month, we're reading The Sympathizer by Viet Thanh Nguyen. As you read the book, let us know your thoughts on Twitter with the hashtag LRH Book Club, or leave comments on our Facebook page or our website, literaryroadhouse.com. And be like Eleanor, leave a thoughtful comment on iTunes and let us know what you think of our show. We don't have a wealthy father-in-law, and we keep this show going with contributions from listeners like you. Patrons also get exclusive access to bonus content, such as a video interview with our guest, Susan. Interested? Visit patreon.com/literaryroadhouse. Every bit helps. This was a great discussion, guys.
Thank you. It was
This
a great
was
book.
fun. Thank
great
you.
Choice.
Yay. Maybe we'll read something else like this soon. We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.